you're looking to add club head speed, I'm going to take you through an 8-week training program that you can follow along to that is guaranteed to add 5 mile an hour club head speed. That's up to 15 yards more carry with driver. In this video series, I'm going to take you through my own personal routine over the next 8 weeks that I want you to follow along to help increase your physical capacity and swing speed mechanics. I'm going to be releasing a video every 2 weeks to help you keep updated on my progress, to help give you tips and progressions of how we move forward and how we develop the physical capacity and swing speed. To help you follow along and track your own progress, I'm going to put the training that includes the mobility, the main exercises and the speed routine in my SB Golf Performance app with the link in the description. If you sign up to my app through the link below, I'm going to give you the first 4 weeks for free. I believe that this routine is 100% going to improve your club head speed, and I want you to get started and committed to move forward. For me personally, I've played very little golf over the winter months and training hasn't been as focused as in the past. As a result, I know that my club head speed needs increasing to get ready for the season ahead. We're going to take you through the program that I'm going to do 3 times a week with the physical training, whether that's in the gym or at home. I'm also going to be doing some mobility routines on my days off, and then we're going to be looking at 1 to 2 speed training routines per week. To start all good golf training programs, we need to focus on some mobility of the hips and the thoracic spine. Golfers tend to focus a little bit too much on mobility, but it's also important to keep that in there as a warm-up or on an off day. If you're feeling tight, you can do extra, but fundamentally it's important to keep those hips loose because they're part of rotation in the golf swing, and that thoracic spine, which is predominantly the rib cage and how the trunk moves through the upper body. The exercise I've chosen to get the hips moving at this stage for me is a raised pigeon stretch. This is really simple to do. You can do this on the floor as a normal pigeon stretch, but with it being raised and having the bench, it just makes it a little bit easier to get into, especially if you're really tight in the hips. And you can still kind of adjust the bench from higher to lower depending on how mobile you are to give an extra stretch. So you can just see how we've got this, for me, at 45-degree angle. I'm just going to get a 90-degree position. I'm going to lean into that to get the stretch through the glute. This is really opening up the hip in an external manner and just giving some easy flexibility just to get moving, to make sure we kind of maximize some range of motion in there before we move on to some more advanced exercises. And over the week, I'll lower this bench to make it a little bit more challenging, so my hip position will be even more open to have to then move to the next level. Now I'm going to move into a staggered stance torso rotation with a band. This band is quite strong. Obviously, the stronger the band, the harder it is. So you can use kind of any type of resistance band really for this exercise, and it's great for getting that thoracic starting to rotate and stretch, but this will also couple up as a hip mobility exercise. So we're kind of starting the session by really mobilizing those 2 key areas that are essential for the golf swing. We're just going to simply put it behind the back so we're locked in, and just from side on, you can see a little bit of a staggered position. I'm just hinged over from here, so I've got almost like a golf posture, which then just kind of gives me that feeling of engaging the correct muscles, and I'm just going to turn into my front hip and try and feel like I really turn that chest, and imagine that as my rib cage is rotating around the spine, and I'm getting lots of hip engagement as well as stability. So I'm really firing up all the key muscle groups that are going to be important for rotation, and then obviously learning to get a greater range of motion as we go through the session. Now we've warmed up the body, got the hips and the thoracic spine mobilized, spent some time doing that, we can now move into some more strength focus. Obviously we need the lower body to be strong. In particular, the hamstrings, they play a really key role in how they rotate the pelvis, but also how it creates ground force and stability, which is obviously really important to club head speed and injury protection. I'm going to focus on a eccentric motion, which is going to be me going down slow, and this is also couples up as a lengthening or a stretching motion in the hamstring, so we get strength and mobility occurring. Just focus on some heavy dumbbells. We're going to go nice narrow stance, keeping the knees pretty much straight, hinging down for about 3-4 seconds, really feeling that stretch in the hamstrings, head down, but then use some power out of the ground. So we're really utilizing that ground force, that powerful hip extension, and that strength starts to build up so we can move into some more compound type movements later on in the programs. We're going to couple a hamstring bridge exercise with the hip hinge. That helps just get a little bit more extra endurance, because we're focused on more like that general preparation of training in the first couple of weeks. We need to get the body prepared to train for some heavier movements later on in the programs. So a box chair, roughly knee height, something like that. The higher it is, the harder. So we've got to kind of figure out where the strength is, where the stability is. But we're simply just going to lie on the floor, heels at 90-degree angles on the box. I like having my hands on the hips. This helps kind of feel where the pelvis is at, where I can really lock out and engage those hamstrings and the glutes at the top of the movement. So I'm just going to set my core, full push, fully lock out, squeeze in this area for a good 2 seconds, down and repeat. And I want to be doing this enough times so I really start to get some activation kicking in that key muscle groups that we're preparing for bigger movements as we move forwards. Now we're going to move into the upper body. The upper body is just as important to train as the lower body, but golfers often ignore this area. The upper body key muscle groups, where we're going to focus on a push-pull variation, that are important for speed and power and producing lots of force, which is what we obviously need to achieve within this program. So the first one is going to go into a push-up. Now obviously on the floor, that's going to be quite challenging for a lot of people. So what I like to kind of focus on to keep it nice and simple and just develop some motion in that kind of pec area, which is where we want to get that strength as well as through the trunk stability, is just trying to keep quite neutral in the width of grip. So we go roughly shoulder width or just beyond, but then the depth we can start off really small. So it's nice and easy. It's like, okay, can I get sort of a quarter rep? Easy. Can I move any lower? And then ideally we want to be full range of motion, keeping the trunk stable. And as long as we can find what depth is ideal, then we can build that up over the weeks, because we need to get some really good strength through those upper body muscles that are going to play a key role in producing that speed. So supersetting the push-up with the rowing motion, these obviously muscle groups and these actions work opposingly, which is great for, again, trunk stability and rotation, the key muscle power groups in the back of the body this time. I'm focusing on a staggered stance bent over row, so we're going to use a bench chair roughly knee height, bringing one leg back, and whichever arm we're rowing with, that's the back leg, so we've got that space. In this position, because we've got that weight trying to pull the body around, and we have to then stabilise through the trunk, so it doubles up as a pulling motion through the lat strength exercise as well as a core stability. From here, we can just get used to feeling like we're stabilising through the ground and keeping that shape while creating some load through that key lat muscle and developing this over the weeks into going into some bigger rowing type motions. So now we're going to move into the final superset. First exercise, we're going to focus on a vertical pushing motion. So that's going to get the strength through the shoulders, but it's also going to have to stabilise that trunk. Again, key development to be able to resist motion in the golf swing, which is obviously super important to being able to hold those positions, but also being able to create good postural control throughout your golf swing. So again, that's important to consistency of strike, being able to create force through the ground and transfer it to the club head. So we're going to focus on an Arnie press, because it's quite a simple exercise to do. We don't need to go super heavy, but we have to learn to stand really tall and maintain the motion. So feet roughly hip to shoulder width apart, so I can feel like I'm really stable and planted in the ground. Always feel like the hips are pushed forward, so almost like your glute muscles feel really tight. You're going to go into kind of a bicep, top of a bicep curl feeling, and from there we're just going to push up through the ceiling, fully lock out without losing postural control, bring it down with a bit of stability. From side on, we really see how I'm going to lock my glutes out, stay tall, drive, full lockout, so the arms are in line with the ears at the very least, and then I'm controlling it down without losing any postural control. So the final exercise, we're going to focus on a vertical power ground force exercise. I've chosen a box jump because when we land, we're breaking up the fall on the floor, so it's not as painful or as forceful, let's say, on the knees and the hips in landing, so we can really get that focus on that vertical push-off. As we note throughout the session, we've supersetted, so I've gone from an upper body exercise into a lower body power, so I don't have to rest as long, but that then also makes the session much more efficient and shorter to get through, where I've covered the whole body in the key muscle groups, and I can then move through and crack on with speed training and getting full recovery ready to perform the next session. So with the box jump, focus on something around about knee high. This really just depends on your actual starting power. By going lower is not an issue. We're not necessarily trying to get up on the box. We're focusing on when we leave the ground, we're creating that maximal effort to push off and almost try and feel like we get as tall in the air as possible, so we get that full hip extension, which is again that real powerful, explosive snapping and driving of the hips, where we get a lot of speed and power from. So all I'm going to do, get as tall in the air as possible, and then land on the box nice and safe, step it back down and repeat, and really drive off that ground with 100% effort. So we're now going to move into the speed training routine. It's really, really important that whenever you do this routine, you do the dynamic warm-up that's going to be in the app. Now, unless you've been training and you come straight to do your speed routine, always warm up in advance, because this is obviously going to reduce that risk of injury, which is always a little bit higher when we do speed training, because typically most people's body won't be used to it. Obviously, as the weeks go on, this will reduce anyway through the training and the body getting used to doing more speed training, putting more force through the system. The single most important thing that we need as well is a measuring device. So something that's going to measure either club head speed or ball speed. Ideally, we want club head speed, because that's going to be the rawest calculation. Ball speed can depend too heavily on strike. However, that's not always going to be accessible. So if you go to a driving range that has, say, TrackMan or Top Tracer that measures ball speed, that's kind of going to have to be reliable enough. But the most important thing is you're measuring something. If you do have access to a more advanced radar that measures club head speed, like your TrackMans, your Flight Scopes, your GC Quads, brilliant. However, I'm going to use a PRGR device. These are exceptionally good and very reliably accurate. They're not expensive, so if you do want access to buy one of these, just follow the link in the description to get one. They're going to be nice and easy, where we can kind of look at both the club and ball speed numbers, so we can record both if needs be, but we're using the same device throughout. So whatever you do use, always use the same system throughout, because they do all measure slightly differently, and then we've got that reliable consistency to know truly whether that club head speed's increased or not. So before we get started with any of the process, before we start doing the training program, the physical training program, we need to get a clear baseline of what our current speed numbers are. This is going to tell us exactly where we're at this moment in time. Whether, even if you're under fatigue, even if you've not been playing much golf, we still need that baseline to know what the starting point is. So today I'm just going to record those numbers. I'm going to go through the actual speed routine, so it's session 1. I'm going to record all these numbers in app, and we're going to go through of how that session's going to look. But obviously, if you want to understand what that looks like in more detail, you need to sign up to the first month for free. So first and foremost, we're going to hit X amount of balls, where we're just focusing on more like the normal driver swing. So for me, we know my speed's a little bit down because I've not been playing and training as much, but I don't know exactly where it's at, and then we've got that clear starting point before moving forward. So I'm just going to hit a couple. And after each one, you can see that's going to give me my club head speed. What we can do on the PRGR, which is really effective, is it records X amount of shots. So you can actually go back at the end and then fill in your data on the app. And then we're just going to go a few more and put all those in and see what that looks like as more your club playing speed on the course. Okay, and then we're going to move into what we class as more like 95% effort. And that's going to look like if we're trying to give that bit more oomph. So we're not just looking for the fairway, we're trying to maybe carry a bunker a bit more distance. And we should see, in theory, a clear jump up between that kind of first set and that second set. We're looking for trends here. We're not looking for perfection. Not every swing is going to be greater. Not every session is going to be better. We're looking for a consistent trend over a period of time. So straight away, that club speed's gone up for me. I've just gone a little bit harder at that. I've just widened my stance. I'm just feeling like I'm moving a little bit more aggressively. and we're going to hit X amount of balls and take those recordings again. And then finally, and this is going to be the final set, and this is obviously where we're looking for the max effort, the peak force. This is the kind of the baseline numbers that we're trying to take that 100% up, so then the 90%, the normal stock swings on the course, is dragged up with it. So whatever that is going to be, that's going to be kind of some of the key data. Now with this, and it's really important when you're speed training to know, I'll go into more detail on the app, is we've got to get away from the quality of shot. We've got to look for what that max number is going to be with club head speed. So even if it feels out of control, poor strike, feels a little bit abnormal for what you'd normally do, we've got to find a way to actually move with more force and more energy. So straight away this should look a little bit more aggressive. And then we're going to go through that set, record all our data. So to get started, all you need to do is follow the training program and the speed routine that's in the app, record all your information, start to see some little basic progress. It's not about the first 2 weeks, it's about the longer term, but obviously we need to get started. I'll be back in 2 weeks with an update on my own personal progress and a follow-up video into the next stage. If you have any questions about any of the information covered, whether that's from the training or the speed work, just leave a comment in the video and I'll give you an update on what you need to do next.